This is the Aunty and Brain Tumours talk show. It's a show full of informative chat and inspirational messages. The Aunty and Brain Tumours talk show on podcast.
Hi, I'm Katie and I was diagnosed with an Oligoastrocytoma grade 2 in November 2015. I'd been to the doctor several times, and the last time, so I hadn't had any of your classic, apart from the very severe headaches, which, you know, from a doctor's perspective, understandably can be attributed to many things. But on the last occasion, I remember having this sort of a tingling sensation that went, starting in my ring finger of my left hand, spread to my little finger, went all the way up my forearms, stayed for about 15 seconds, and then I could feel it coming down. It's like bugs crawling up and down my arm. And at that point, because I'd convinced myself I was having migraines, I just thought it was an aura, something like that. I never, ever imagined that. I think, like most people, you expect a seizure to manifest in the classic collapse on the ground and shake. I never imagined that seizures could present in ways like that. And that's one of the things I think that was a big challenge for me at the beginning, that I couldn't recognise what they were because they could emulate other everyday things that happen to you. So I think at that point, I think my mum was starting to get quite worried at this point because these headaches weren't going away. I was being sick, nothing was taking them. They were worse at night. They were the classic brain tumour headaches, but no one had really noted that. So I went to the doctors and the doctor said, okay, he did a series of neurological tests and he said, I'm not particularly worried because your neurological tests are absolutely fine, but I am going to refer you to an MRI and I'm going to make it an urgent one. So I think it was the last day, it was the penultimate day, the Thursday of half term, because I was a teacher, the Thursday of the half term in October, where I got a cancellation. I got a phone call from the hospital and they said, oh, you can come in for your MRI scan. And they told me, afterwards, you need to make an appointment with the doctor tomorrow. They will call you to discuss your results. So I called on the Friday. I'd got plans to go out with some friends on that Friday. I called on the Friday morning and they said, oh, no, we don't get results for MRI scans until 2 weeks. So just call back in 2 weeks, make an appointment with the doctor. So at that point, I just thought nothing was wrong. Went out with friends in a place where there was no signal, no mobile phone signal. And then when I got home, it was about maybe 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening. My doctor called to say, you need to go to A&E right now. I've called them. I've called the hospital, the QE in Birmingham. I've got somebody on the case looking at your scans. She said that there was an anomaly on your brain scan. So at that point, I thought it could be, you know, an aneurysm that was going to burst. I thought I might have a stroke. But one thing she did make very clear was that A&E were at my local hospital were ready and waiting. And I just needed to go because it was very serious and I needed to get treatment like ASAP. So then I immediately called my mum. Luke called his parents to say that we were going to the hospital and this is what was going to happen. And then we arrived at A&E and they were ready and waiting for me. And then I kind of just sat there for a while. They gave me a really high dose of steroids, dexamethasone. And in half an hour, my headache had gone away. And I was kind of relieved that there was a, you know, an answer to this issue that I'd been experiencing for such a long time, that I wasn't going to have to just live with this forever. Because up until this point, I'd had no answers. So I sat there thinking, okay, what could this be? They came in and they said, yeah, it's a tumour. And at that point, I was in that naive category of, okay, do we think it's cancerous? Do we think it's benign? I didn't have a clue about, you know, how they can all sort of merge into one and it can affect you in different ways. That they, you know, sometimes they are as bad as each other. And I'll be honest, a lot of the A&E staff didn't really have any idea. They didn't know what to tell me. So then and it was all like fairly surreal at that point. I just didn't know what to think. I couldn't really accept that this was actually happening to me. And my actual thoughts were, oh, I've got a really great Halloween costume and I was supposed to be going to a great bonfire party. I'm not going to be able to do that now. It's got brain tumour. It was like that weird. Then on the Friday evening, a junior doctor came in and said, yeah, we are really sorry to say that it is a tumour, which is not the kind of news. She actually said, it's not the kind of news you want to hear on a Friday night, is it? To which we responded, well, it's not actually the kind of news you want to hear any night of the week, but it's particularly bad on a Friday because I'll miss my Halloween party. So I wasn't really sad at that point. I was in such a state of shock and surprise. It wasn't real to me. So I didn't cry. I just kind of sat there. My mum had bought a packet of wine gums, red and black wine gums. I just sat there eating those. And, I still got trauma from, like, when I eat wine gums now, because it takes me back to that place. Anyway, sorry, I've digressed. So they said, you've got to go to the QE and get some surgery, more or less immediately. And we thought that was going to happen that night. But I was actually in my local hospital for a week because of lots of other things going on at the hospital. And so a week later, I'm in the QE. It's very, very late and I'm on the list for surgery the next morning. And it all happened so quickly that I didn't really know what to do. I was on this bed. The next thing I know, they were coming to take blood, for cross bloods for surgery the next day. And then the following morning, an anaesthetist comes to see me, says, this is what's going to happen. Can you sign this? And then a consultant comes to see me and says, so you could die of a stroke. This could happen. You could lose your speech. You could lose your ability to move several different functions. Or, if you don't have the surgery, you're going to die of intracranial pressure because it's so big and something will happen. So it's either you sign a consent form to say any of those things could happen, or you don't sign the consent form, you don't go through the brain surgery, and you die from that. So it's like a catch-22 situation. So I obviously signed the consent form, and I think at that point, it kind of kicked into me that I could be waking up a completely different person. My husband might have to look after me in a completely different way. And that's when it really hit me, and I actually cried for the first time. Luke and I both cried together. And I think that was the scariest moment, that I might not wake up for this. This might be it for me. My mum and dad were on their way, so I hadn't got a chance to see them. And thankfully they arrived just as I was being wheeled down the corridor. So I could kind of say goodbye to them, because in my head, there was a really good possibility that I was going to die. And I know that may sound really dramatic, but that is exactly how I felt at the time. So when I woke up, everything was totally normal, and I recognised my husband, and my mum and dad were there, and I could talk and I could move. That was a massive relief. So that was the first thing. That was the first hurdle out the way. And then I kind of had this sense of hope, like, okay, I've had surgery, they've got rid of the tumour. That's it. Like, wow, what an experience to go through to make you really value the important things in life. Then following the surgery, we had sort of biopsy results to tell us what kind of tumour it was. And at that point, it was classed as a grade 2 oligoastrocytoma, which is a mix of oligodendrocytes and astrocytes. At the time I was diagnosed, it was actually grade 2, which meant that it was going to progress to a higher level of cancer. But the treatment that they did on it at that point was only surgery, because obviously the brain is a sensitive area. Radiotherapy and other treatments are quite difficult to go through, particularly on the brain. So they wanted to keep that in reserve for when the tumour progressed to a later stage. And I was given a 50-50 chance of reaching the age of 40 and a 30% chance of the tumour returning within 5 years, which it did do. So my original surgery was November 2015. I had a second surgery to remove the tumour, which had regrown in March 2018. And at that point, I was told that it had upped a level to a grade 3. But also the genetic testing that had been done on the second tumour actually was a bit more positive, because the first type suggested that it was going to mutate very quickly to a more aggressive cancer. But they retested it the second time, and actually it was more of an oligodendroglioma than an astrocytoma. And anyone that knows anything about brain tumours will tell you that an astrocytoma is significantly worse than an oligodendroglioma. So that made my prognosis slightly better. The big factor in all of that was that they had revealed a co-deletion, and it gets all very scientific here. So that I was IDH2 mutated, which was why there was the mix-up with the original tumour, because it wasn't mutated on IDH1, which is what they normally just test for to check whether this is going to turn aggressive very quickly. So it turns out I actually had a mutation on the IDH2 gene, and then they tested for the co-deletion of P19Q. Now, if that is present, that tumour type is significantly more responsive to a type of treatment, a type of chemotherapy with radiotherapy, which is what I had. The surgeon said to me, "Do you want to do anything about this now?" And I said, "Yeah, I want surgery, I want chemo, and I want radio. All of it. I want to live as long as possible, and whatever I can do to make that happen, do it." Of course, we weren't expecting that within that 5 years. We thought we might have another maybe 5-7 years if we were lucky to live our lives. I say we because my husband has gone through all of this with me. It's just as much his story that it is mine. So yeah, we didn't ever we never expected it to happen in the first place, because it's never going to be you. But then we never expected for me to have had that surgery, to be told, there's this chance that it would come back. I don't think we'd given a second thought that it would be back so quickly. It would have upped a grade, and we would be looking at really, horrible treatments. And we got a little boy at that point as well, which made things extremely difficult. So yeah, that's things as they stand. I've been stable now since I had treatment in 2019 was when I finished my chemotherapy, and I've had stable scans since that point. And then this year in November, it will be 10 years since I had my original surgery. So that's a really big celebration. And I will also turn 40 in a few weeks' time in May, which is also a massive achievement for me. So double celebrations this year. However, I still have grief. I'm in this situation, and the two can coexist. You can still feel blessed, but you can still grieve the life that you would have had this not happened to you. So I think that is one of the hardest things for people to understand. When I'm having a rubbish day, it's not that I don't appreciate, people go, "Oh, well, my child died or my son died when he was 23. And I get it. That is such a horrible thing. What a young age for someone to lose their life. And in comparison, I am so much luckier than a lot of other brain tumour patients. I really am. And I understand that. But it's still happening to me, and it's still really horrible to get up. And it never goes away, to get up, and it's the first thing that I think about every morning. This is happening to me. At any point, this tumour could come back, and I will have, 6 months to live, and that's it. I have this constant negotiation with my consultant about scan lengths, because I went from 3 months to 4 months to 6 months. And I was always told originally by my original consultant, who unfortunately retired. He did my second surgery and then he retired, who was like a leading practitioner in his field. Do not go longer than 6 months. Okay, this has always got to be monitored by that length of time, those increments. So when I was told then that I had to go to 9 monthly scans, that filled me with such anxiety because I've done everything I can to stay alive for as long as possible. And to be told, okay, well, you're going to go up to 9 monthly scans now, and then we'll start considering doing a year. And I just said, look, for me to go from 6 monthly scans, having that reassurance every 6 months that everything's stable, that's hard enough. But to go then to 9 months and to a year, I don't think I can do that for my mental well-being. I don't think that could happen. I will just be living my life on the edge all the time. And they say, oh, well, if you have any symptoms, you can come back and we'll scan you. But given the fact that my tumour got to the size that it got to, with only me having headaches, which I now experience all of the time anyway, I had no clinical symptoms the time that I had the recurrence. So if I'd left it, technically, I said to them, my tumour could start growing the day after I had that scan. And then I've left that for 9 months without doing anything about it because you have not let me have a scan at more regular intervals. So at 9 months, it might be at the point where we can't do anything. It's spread to the point where I'm not able to have surgery because it's gone into an area of my brain that is inoperable and that other treatments might not work. So that's been a real difficulty for me. So I have this back and forth with my consultant every time we go. I just said to them last time, if you don't scan me every 6 months, I will go and I'll have to find the money to pay for a private scan for my peace of mind. So I went to a couple of support groups and they gave me some information. A charity called Brains Trust, they sent a box with stuff. And there's a good book in there, Living Low Grade by Gideon Burrows, that explained about living with a low-grade brain tumour and the challenges that you would face. And then emotionally, so I got a lot of practical tips from those charities in terms of what I needed to do, monitoring medication, this kind of thing. And as a result of that, got a lot of online forums where I could ask questions to people. And I've actually made a few friends they've taught me through their experience at that point. I have to be honest and say support groups didn't particularly help. And this may seem horrible now, but there were people in those support groups because brain tumours and brain cancer, although they all fall under brain tumours, there are so many different types and some of them are truly benign. And I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that those tumours don't have a really significant impact on somebody's life and change it, and they have to live with debilitating symptoms, and it's had a real, caused major difficulties in their life. But people go to those groups who fall into that category, but then you also get people who have glioblastomas and have been given months to live, and then you get people like me who are not at that point yet, but kind of get a bit angry and bitter with the people who are moaning, quite rightly so, about their symptoms, but who aren't going to die. And I found that very, very difficult to deal with. I'm being completely honest. So, but also felt very guilty about moaning, being in my situation when there were people there who had got weeks, months to live. So that was very difficult from both ends for me. So I just stopped going to the support groups. I did seek alternative counselling from other charities in the local area, and then Luke paid for some private counselling for me for a time. But in truth, I don't think those worked for me because it was never ever going to take away the issue. The only thing that would make me feel better was if somebody told me, your life's gone back to normal, you're not going to die potentially before you're 40 and you can go off and live your life as normal. And that was never going to be the case. Reaching a point of acceptance that you have to grieve the life that you had before. And again, I know I'm not on death's door immediately, but I'm not going to have that life that I imagined I was going to have. So that comes with a whole separate grieving process. And I still don't think I've accepted it, because these days I just live sort of a week at a time. So yeah, that was one of the biggest challenges for me, I think, just reaching that acceptance. Okay, you're not going to live that life now. What are you going to do instead? So I started to get involved with brain tumour research. I need to try and make a difference. I don't want to know what I know about brain tumours and how they affect and kill. They're the biggest cancer killer of the under 40s and children. And still we haven't got a cure. I can't know that information and not try and do something about it and be proactive. And I knew that this charity were putting funds into research to try and find a cure, to try and find, just new, better treatments, because there hasn't been a new brain tumour treatment now since temozolomide came along, which was over 20 years ago. And they need to start trying more novel, unique approaches, because those things aren't working and they're horrible. They're barbaric. Children have to go through these treatments. And when mothers are desperately trying to raise money to get their child to have a clinical trial in Germany or America, because there are no other options on the NHS, and having had a little boy at that point, I just thought, if I were in that situation with my kid, what would we do? What would I do about it? And it broke my heart to think about that. And so I just said, let's throw ourselves into this. So we created a fundraising group under the title of Brainstorm. And I didn't set up my own charity because that was all a faff. You have to get trustees and this, that, the other. And I just didn't want the stress of that. But brain tumour research allowed you to do that, to have your own kind of branding, to go off and do things, sort of your own way, but ultimately it falls under the umbrella of brain tumour research. And that is where I wanted any of the money that I raised to, not necessarily because I thought this was going to have an impact on me. I think I'll be long gone before they find a treatment that will cure brain cancer. But if other families, typically mothers of young children, didn't have to go through that, then I will have done something. I will have had some kind of impact. And I want my little boy to know that I did try to make a difference. I want him to be proud of the fact that he had a mom that tried to change things. We're always instilling that into him. Be kind, be a person that is proactive and does things to make a difference. And I needed to set that example. So over the last, probably 10 years, I've been just doing lots of things to try and raise awareness of the fact that brain tumours kill more children and the biggest cancer killer of children and the under 40s, because not a lot of people know that. And I think that is something that people should be more aware of. To raise awareness of this charity that are trying to do something about it, because if you don't know charity exists, you can't donate to them, you can't help them. And then also, so thanks Eli, my son and my little boy, who has no knowledge of this. He only knows that mummy gets headaches and goes to bed every afternoon. But he will reach a stage where he will know what's happening. And I want him to know that he's the person that saved my life. That's it, really. So thanks, Eli. You're a champ.
This is the Aunty and Brain Tumours talk show. It's a show full of informative chat and inspirational messages. The Aunty and Brain Tumours talk show on podcast.